rationally, mania, talks too much, OCD, depression, ADHD. Any of that ring a bell? Covers spirituality, morality, and the will. All right. What is found in milk that's not healthy for us? Casein, yes. And that breaks down into what in our system? Breaks down into what? How many, this is your first time here? Amen. This is your first time here. Hey, Kimmy, how are you? Amen. Oh, we have some visitors. Okay. All right. You know, we're so happy to, huh? Yes, but there's like 1, 2, 3 that was here yesterday, and if we include the pastor and Joe, that's about 5 people. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to concede this time here because I know you guys are all excited about Dr. Miller being here. So I would hope that you have your pencils, your papers, or your iPads, your iPods, or something to write with, and take copious notes. And if you forget anything or you would like to see it again, there's a video. It will be on YouTube, so you can go back and look at the videos that Dr. Miller has presented here this evening. They are very, very helpful. And without further ado, I'm going to ask the pastor to come and give us prayer. And then after the pastor prayer, Dr. Miller will come.
Let's bow our heads for prayer. Gracious Father, we thank you so much for all the things that we learned from Monday up to this day. We thank you for sustaining Dr. Miller and everyone that came every evening, those who are also watching. We pray tonight as we conclude this Health Emphasis Week, but then on Sunday we'll be coming back for the cooking class. We pray that tonight's topic will be a topic that will help us, help people in our family, help ourselves prevent cancer and things that lead to that. We pray that you'll be with Dr. Miller tonight as he delivers it to us, and that it will be clear to everyone. Help us also to remember to put all these things that we'll learn into practice and go back to those videos that we recorded to remember things that we learned here so that we can really make a difference in our lifestyle as we prepare ourselves for your second coming. Thank you so much for everyone that is here tonight. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, it's been a fast week. Yeah, it just zipped right on by. And this night, tomorrow night, I'll be in Kirgashima getting ready to give another talk up there, so it doesn't really slack up too much. How many of you have had cancer? How many of you have had cancer? I'll answer the question for you. Every single one of you have had cancer. It rises up many times in our lives, but the body is able to get rid of those cancers through the immune system, through a thing called apoptosis. There's certain functions in the body that will keep us healthy. It's when we allow our bodies to become weak that then cancer gets from 1 cell to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, 32, 64, and keeps on going. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the cancer today. It's the #1 killer in Japan and many other countries. And I guess we need to ask the question, what is cancer? I showed this picture the other day. This is a cancerous growth on a knee of an 18-year-old young man in Zimbabwe. And basically, cancer cells that are growing very, very quickly. When a person has cancer, normally in allopathic medicine, they'll be given a thing called chemotherapy. What does chemotherapy do? It kills fast-growing cells. Hair grows fast. That's why it falls out. Your immune system gets shot because white blood cells grow fast and the tumor cells grow fast. Here's the way. You've got about, some words up to 300 trillion cells in your body. We got a lot of cells in our body, but each one grows at different rates. Here we've got colon cells. Every 4 days, your colon cells are turning over. So basically, in a few weeks, you got a whole new colon. Skin cells, every 2 to 3 weeks. Now, sometimes they grow faster than that, and that causes a thing we call psoriasis. When you see these big white patches on somebody, that's because for some reason the body's out of whack and you're building skin cells on top of skin cells. Red blood cells, lifespan of about 4 months, and white blood cells, lifespan of a year. And so in a year, basically, you've got a whole new immune system down there in your body. But at the end of the day, all cancers have one primary foundation, that is mutation of the DNA. Now, you know what the DNA is. That's that package of information in the nucleus of your cells. And every time your cell divides, that nucleus divides and that DNA divides. And every time your DNA divides, it's going to pick up 1 to 4 mutations. And they accumulate through your lifetime. And you pass them down. Mothers passed them down to their daughters. Okay, so what's causing all these mutations that we have the problem with? One thing is contact with our environments. The environment that I grew up in was much better than the environment that young people today are growing up in. We're not just talking about media now, we're talking about everything was different 60, 70 years ago. But there are certain things, we're going to look at what, if you ask an average person on the street, what causes cancer, you're going to get some of these answers. The possible factors in cancer development. 1, heredity. Have you heard that one? Oh, it runs in the family. You hear that mantra all the time. It runs in my family. We had a delivery man at Uchee Pines years ago, and he was getting ready to retire, and he told us, he says, well, I'm getting ready to retire, but I'm not going to live long. My grandfather died of a heart attack. My father died of a heart attack, and I'm going to die of a heart attack. Now, you see what's wrong with that picture? If you tell yourself you're going to die of a heart attack, you probably just will do that. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, all right? So heredity. How about aging? We find it as a person gets older. We used to call it entering into the cancer age. Accumulated damage to the DNA and damage to the body over years. Yes, you're going to have more cancer as you get older. How about inflammation? Almost every chronic disease is an inflammatory process. Cancer certainly is one of those. Tobacco use, major cause of cancers. Right next to alcohol use, bad stuff. Cancer-causing substances that we have in our home, including the things that we clean our house with. These are chemicals. These are toxic chemicals. Viruses. Now, I'm going to go over each one of these again in a little bit broader way and show you what we can do about each one of these things. But viruses is another one. Diet, basically not getting enough fruits and vegetables in your diet. It can certainly cause more cancer. Obesity. Obesity not only causes cancer, but it makes certain cancers grow far faster. If a woman has endometrial cancer, it will increase the growth of rate if she's overweight by 12 times. Whoa, it's a good time to lose weight. Ionizing radiation. Should we be concerned with ionizing radiation here in Japan? Yes. Yeah, why? Well, Chernobyl, that's in Ukraine, but it's also coming here. But we're talking about Fukushima Daiichi in Japan. Lack of exercise. I think I mentioned exercise every night this week. Are you doing it yet? Immunosuppression. If you have a weakened immune system. Remember I said that all of us have had cancer? If your immune system's strong, it's going to find that errant cell, and it's going to, through a macrophage or killer T cells, it's going to kill that cell. It's good news. All right, now we're going to go down each one of these one at a time. Let's look at tobacco first, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on these. Tobacco. 1/3 of all cancers are caused by tobacco. Now, frankly, you can take that as good news. Why? Well, if you don't use tobacco, you just cut your risk of cancer by 1/3. That's a pretty good advantage, isn't it? I used to smoke. Many people who smoke, and probably most people who smoke, want to quit. I can guarantee them they're going to quit. It just depends when. They're going to quit now by making that conscious decision, or they're going to quit when they take their last breath and they're dead. My recommendation is we quit now. So anyway, tobacco, we don't have to do it. I quit on April the 1st, 1973. Have never touched it since then. How about alcohol? Just say no to the stuff. Alcohol is poison to the body. Not only is it poison to the body, it's poison to the mind. People who drink alcohol do the stupidest things. I remember when I was stationed here in 1974-75, we were out on the Marine Amphibious Unit. We're in the Philippines at Marine Corps birthday time, November the 10th. And I remember the officers in my company, we didn't drink alcohol, but everyone else drank alcohol. We're sitting across from some young second lieutenant, and he is way, way drunk. So what does he do? He takes a bite out of his glass. Now that is downright stupid. Then he takes another glass and smashes it in his hand. You do stupid things when you're drinking alcohol. Besides the fact that alcohol wastes a huge amount of money. Unbelievable amount of money. And it greatly increases the risk of many types of cancers. Oral cancer, laryngeal cancer, esophageal cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer, colon cancer. All of these are greatly increased by the consumption of alcohol. But there's something else about that. Alcohol, beer, has a pH of 3. Now, if you don't know what a pH is, it stands for hydrogen potential. The lower the number, the higher the acidity. And cancer loves an acid environment. Wine is a pH of 4. Now, you've probably heard it said that drinking a little bit of wine is good for you. Well, didn't Paul tell Timothy that? Paul told Timothy, drink a little wine for your stomach's sake. Was he talking about Mogen David? Was he talking about fermented wine? He was talking about grape juice. Grape juice has resveratrol. The only advantage of wine is the resveratrol that you might find in that if it's coming from red or purple grapes. Otherwise, it's acid is pH 4. So we don't need the alcohol. Okay, now the other big one. What about genetics? Can you change your genetics? Can a guy become a girl? I don't care how much surgery they have and how much hormone therapy they have, they're not going to change their gender. The DNA is going to say either XY or XX. But you can do something about that, and I didn't give it my, sorry about that. I always have to have a mistake in my slides. What this is saying, this is a study done by Colin Campbell in China, and it says those who are on a total vegetarian diet, if you have a gene that makes you susceptible to certain diseases like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis, if you have those weakened genes, but you're on a total vegetarian diet, those genes will not express themselves. Does that sound like good news? That means no matter what your genetics are, if you are eating the Edemic diet, you don't have to worry about your bad genes. Okay, so no problem with that thing. How about obesity, overweight? Is there anything we can do about that? Overweight, we're going to be talking about that when we talk about diabetes. We talk about that when we talk about heart disease and high blood pressure and cancer. But there's ways that we can control our weight. One is we go on to a whole food, plant-based diet. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and your basic fluid that you put into your body is going to be water. This is a good way to lose weight. But there's another side to that too. This is what you do. The things that you don't do is all the heavy meat products that people like so much, all the refined foods that people like so much, and not eating the refined foods, the good foods. Eating nothing, this is a hard one for most people, nothing after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is for people who are trying to lose weight, and then practicing the old saw of Hira Hachibu. Is it easy to do? Eating until you're 80% full. It's sort of hard to do sometimes when the food is really good. I'm being put to the test this week. Okay, another way to lose weight, natural whole foods. Again, that's what basically is growing in your area in a plant-based diet. You eat like this, you will lose weight. Guaranteed. Okay, so we don't have to worry about the overweight thing. How about the cleaning materials? You got to have cleaning stuff in your house. We don't want to live in a pig pen. So what can you do about all those toxic chemicals? As a matter of fact, if you look under most sinks, you're going to find 8, 10, 12 different bottles of chemicals. What happens when you mix those chemicals together? Sometimes you produce very toxic gases. So what do? Make your own. Get some vinegar. Put some lemon peel in the vinegar. Add a few drops of oil of oregano to the vinegar. After a few days, take the lemon peel out. The oils that was in the lemon peel has come out into the vinegar, and now you've got an extremely effective cleanser that will clean anything. It will kill anthrax, it will kill tuberculosis, it will kill all kinds of the bad things. MRSA, it'll kill Staphylococcus aureus. Baking soda, that's what you clean your metals and your hard things with. So you can make your own, and vinegar is cheap. Very nice stuff. Make your own cleansers. Now, the next one is inflammation. What can you do for inflammation? Now, we've talked about inflammation the other 2 nights this week, or the other 3 nights. Flaxseed is an anti-inflammatory. It's also high fiber. It's also omega-3 fatty acids. So you're getting many pluses just eating. Now, you've got to eat it ground fresh because it's got a very delicate oil in there, and it's got 3 main enemies: light, heat, and oxygen. As soon as you break that shell, it's going to start to oxidize. You grind it fresh, you put it in your body. Also, there's curcuma or turmeric. That's the one I like very, very much. Now, I used to just recommend people just put a spoonful in water and drink it down. That's fine, but your body only takes a very small amount of the curcuma. Here's what you do. You mix the curcuma with some type of fat. I like coconut oil. And let me go back to the coconut oil there. And then mix them together, put it on bread and eat it. Or you can boil some water. Now, if people say, how much water? How much do you want to drink? I say, boil a liter of water. Once it begins to boil, a slow boil, not a rapid boil, a slow boil, add your curcuma, 1 to 2 tablespoons to that, and let it slow boil for 10 minutes. Then you let it cool and you drink it within 3 hours. Your body will take up 12 times more than it would have had you just mixed it with cold water and drank it down. So what does it do? September 2013, we used to do a cancer seminar every fall here. And this is a lady. She was sitting over to my right the first night, and she does not look happy. She was in pain. She had breast cancer. She had a discharge from her nipple. She was holding most of the time her blouse away from her breast. It was so painful. In August, the month before that, 2013, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer and given 3 months to live. This is September 2013. I like this verse. There's a Bible verse in Romans 8:28 that says, all things work together for good. A few months before I had that bicycle accident I talked about, I think the first night, someone brought me a bottle of curcuma tablets. They're very good for pain. I did not use them, but I brought them with me, and they were in my room. As soon as the meeting was over, I ran to my room, I got the bottle, and I took them to the lady. I says, look, take 2 every night, take 2 every morning. She did. The next morning, the first class, she had no pain and no discharge. This is her picture in June 2016, 3 years later, after she was given 3 months to live. And here it is, 2019, she's still doing well. Now, it wasn't just a curcuma. Don't get this allopathic idea that just take this medicine and it's going to be good for you. She did everything that we said. Everything that I'm going to talk about, she did. We're telling you no less than what we told them. You do what the simple things are, and your body's going to fight. Ginger is another nice anti-inflammatory for the body. It's also great for upset stomach. So these are some of the medications you can take. But my recommendation is you get some curcuma, you have it standing by, because anytime you have a chronic disease, you've got inflammation, anytime you have pain, take the curcuma. Next one is not getting enough fruits and vegetables in the diet. That's a bad one. Well, here's another interesting study. We talked about 1/3 of all cancers are caused by tobacco. Another third are caused by diet. Now, that's cancers. 33% of cancers are caused by diet. But if you look at all the diseases that we deal with, 70% have a foundation in diet. That's a good reason to get onto a very straight diet. Now, they've been carrying on research for cancer for many years. Research for diseases is very lucrative business. You get a bunch of money from the government and you work on the study and you got all the money coming in. Well, one day a bunch of scientists got together and they said, let's get some of these studies that are already done. They got 4,500 completed studies already done. And they say, let's sit down and go through these things and see if we've learned anything yet. So they looked at them all. They're looking for, is there a common thread weaving through all these studies? And this was their conclusion. We don't need any more research. Do what we found out in these 4,500 studies, and cancer rates are going down. What did they find? The diet connection. The diet connection. Now look at, you see the food there. What food is that? Is it a good anti-cancer food? Anything in that family, anything the cruciferous family is anti-cancer. Now, in what form is it the most anti-cancer? No, that's number 3. Boil, never boil it. Steam it. That's number 2. What's number 1? Sprouts. Broccoli sprouts have more sulforaphane in it than anything else, and it is a great fighter of cancer. You know somebody with cancer? Have them get a bunch of broccoli seeds, sprout them, and eat the sprouts. And then also they can lightly steam the vegetable, lightly. It breaks the sulfur bond, which makes it more anti-cancer in your body. So we just need to eat, like our mothers always told us, eat your vegetables. And that's what God wants us to do. That's what He gave us to eat. How about the immune system? See, the immune system is the system that God has given us to make us healthy and keep us healthy. Well, there's always the herb called echinacea. How many have heard of echinacea? All right? It's a natural antibiotic. Okay, only 2 hands went up. Have you ever heard of garlic? Natural antibiotic. Eat the garlic. It does 2 great things. Eat a bunch of garlic, it strengthens your immune system, and it keeps sick people far away from you. It keeps well people far away from you too. Believe me, I've done it. But we need to keep this immune system strong. In this picture, that yellow thing in the middle is a cancer cell. All those white things are called killer T cells. And when that cancer cell develops, your helper T cells send the killers to the cancer cell and they destroy it if everything is working right. So how do we do it? Well, we got to drink our water. We need to stay away from sugar. We need to get our rest at night. But I want to expand out a little bit bigger than, oh yeah, we also get our exercise. But let me give you some simple, quick pointers on how to make our immune system strong. 1, a whole food, plant-based diet. That's the key. Because what that does, first of all, it allows your immune system to rest. If you're eating anything from an animal, there's so many negative things in the animal, your immune system is always tuned up. It's always overworking to try to keep you well from the food you're eating. But this way, your body's going to rest. Second thing, have a resting pulse rate under 70, preferably even under 60. So now how do you know your resting pulse rate? You just sit there and put your little fingers underneath your thumb on your wrist and you count how many beats are in a minute. But you do that a few times during the day to get the average. If you're up around 80, you better start. And the only way you can lower the pulse, well, how can you lower the pulse rate? Huh? Exercise. You get out there and start moving your body, make the heart stronger, and it doesn't have to work so hard because it's got a better, it's sending that blood through your system. All right, another thing to have a good, strong immune system is keep your urine pale. How do we do that? Drinking your water, yes. Another thing, get plenty of oxygen. Well, I say oxygen. How much of the air you breathe is oxygen? It's about 20%. But you got to get it. The rest is, major part is nitrogen, but that's neither here nor there. But we got to have fresh air. Got to open the windows every once in a while. We got to get outside to get the fresh air. All right, how about sugar? Is sugar bad for the body? Yeah, sugar kills the immune system. You put a lot of sugar. A normal white blood cell is capable of destroying 14 microorganisms, viruses, bacteria that we get in our body. But if we're eating sugar, what it does is it weakens our white blood cells. It makes them less effective in the fight against the diseases that we're battling with. Now, we're going to be talking about diabetes, and we're going to be talking about insulin, and on every cell there are receptor sites that basically, and this is a much longer biochemical process, but to make it simplified, there's this receptor site. It's like a keyhole, and insulin reaches in, unlocks, and allows glucose to go in. Again, that's very much of an oversimplification. On an average cell, there are 20,000 receptor sites for glucose. Remember that when we're talking about diabetes in a few minutes. But a cancer loves sugar. And so what does a cancer cell do? It produces more receptor sites for insulin. How many more? 15 times more. 300,000. And so here's another thing. You know somebody with cancer? It is no sugar. None. That includes maple syrup. It includes, what's that one? Agave nectar, which is basically high fructose corn syrup. You got to stay away from the sweeteners. You want sweeteners? Take stevia, which regulates blood sugar. But stay away from the sugar if you've got cancer. If a person loses sleep, 2 hours of sleep, they've cut their immune system in half. We can't do this. Save questions for the end, okay? We need to be able to get a good night of rest at night. So if we do all of these things, our immune system is going to be strong. We don't have to worry about this. Notice we're eliminating what we put down as some of the major causes of cancer. We're slowly eliminating these things. How about lack of exercise, a sedentary lifestyle? We looked at this the other night. Sitting for more than 3 hours causes 3.8% of all deaths in the world every year. 433,000 people dying because they're sitting more than 3 hours. I've been sitting this entire day. I got to start getting some exercise. But I've talked about it every night. We're going to talk about, when we talk about diabetes, we've got to move our bodies. Now, let me just review something. Some people say, but I'm too tired to exercise. Okay, why are we too tired to exercise? What? The mitochondria. If we're not exercising, we're not building up mitochondria in the cell, and that's basically, you're now running on an 8-cylinder engine when you could be running on a 16-cylinder engine. So the more you exercise, the more mitochondria, the more energy that you have. Very, very important point. And I mentioned something else about mitochondria the other night. Many scientists agree that there are 2 main factors in longevity. One is the amount of mitochondria we have in our cells, and 2 is a cutting back on the calories that we're consuming. Those 2 things will allow you to live longer. So get out and move your bodies. Now, can you change your age? It depends on what age you're talking about. Can you change your health age? That's what this is all about. You should be younger when I come back here next year. You can do this. I mean, Hulda Crook started walking in her 60s, not taking her first steps, but she was falling apart, and she started an exercise program in her 60s. She was climbing mountains in her 90s. It's never too late. Well, it is too late. You know when it's too late? She looks so natural. That's when it's too late. Once you're dead, folks, it's too late. We need to get, yeah, okay. Okay, now the next one, radioactive isotopes. Radioactivity. I said that most cancers are caused by mutations to the DNA, and that's going to be, a lot of it's going to be caused by our environment. When we have damage to the DNA, that is exactly what cancer is we've mutated DNA. Does anyone know what that thing is? It's a free radical. How do you know? You see that little dotted line, that's a missing electron. In chemistry, you've got the nucleus, you've got the first ring around it, it's got to have 2 electrons to be balanced. The next ring has to have 8 electrons. You take one away, just became a free radical. So free radical damage damages DNA, which can lead to cancer. Here are some of your sources of free radicals. And frankly, it's a part of our life. As you get older, you develop more free radicals. As you injure yourself, you're developing free radical damage. But the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, high-fat diets will cause you to produce free radicals. If you overeat, you produce free radicals. So we got to get away from those things. But this is the good news. There's always a way to fight even those nasty things. We have things in our food called phytochemicals. Phyto means plant, plant chemicals. And they're in different categories. When I talk about the cruciferous family, we're talking about sulforaphane. We're talking about red things, we're talking about lycopene. Now, lycopene is just one phytochemical in a tomato. The researchers at Cornell University, listen to this is interesting. The research at Cornell University, which is a big research center for nutrition, in contemplating a tomato, They theorized that in an average tomato, there are 10,000 different phytochemicals. And they've only identified about 3,000 so far. They're just saying there's more in there than we understand. So basically, there's a lot of good things. But in one category, there are things called antioxidants. You ever heard of an antioxidant? Yeah, we got to have those things because it's the antioxidants which take care of the free radicals. Okay, here we have a picture. You got up in the upper left-hand corner, we've got an antioxidant. Down the lower right-hand corner, we've got just a normal old atom, no problem. But look what happens to that cell in that atom in the right corner is going to lose an electron. It just became a free radical because it lost an electron. Now, here comes the antioxidant. Now watch what the antioxidant does. What's it doing? What did it just do? Did it do it? Yes. It just gave an electron to the free radical. So it's no longer a free radical. Is the antioxidant now a free radical? It gave up an electron. That's the amazing thing about it. An antioxidant can give up electrons all day and never become a free radical. Why? Because God knew we needed something special in 2019. It's God's protection. And here's your source of antioxidants. That's why they say eat a rainbow every day. Eat the colored foods. Basically, if it's a fruit or a vegetable, it's going to have free antioxidants in there, but especially your brightly colored things. That's what our food is. Now, why am I talking about that? Because ionizing radiation does the same thing. How many of you here have ever had an X-ray? Yeah. Basically, ionizing radiation is radiation that produces so much force, it breaks electrons away from our atoms. Every time you stand in front of that machine, have you ever noticed that when you do that, the person who's the X-ray technician, do they stand there and push the button? No, they get out of there. They go to some bulletproof and leaden room to push the button while you stand there and get scattered with the X-rays. And every X-ray you've ever had is still in your body doing damage. Yeah. Although there's things we can do about it. That's why we're talking about this. See, there's a man named Dr. Akazuki. How many have ever heard of Dr. Akazuki? It's sad. You've probably heard of all the big stars in Japan, but no one thinks about Dr. Akazuki. He's one of my heroes. He was a 29-year-old resident at a hospital in Nagasaki in 1945. 1.4 kilometers from the hypocenter of the nuclear bomb blast. Now, more people died from toxic poisoning from the radiation than died from the initial blast. But in the hospital where he worked, nobody got radiation poisoning. Not a patient, not a worker, because he had been studying radiation. Well, you say, how did he do that? They just dropped the bomb. Did he know about what they were doing over there in the desert in California? No, you don't have to do that. We've got radon. We've got radiation coming up from the earth. We got radiation coming down from the sun. And Madame Curie helped develop X-rays, so we're shooting ourselves with these things. He says, what can we do to protect ourselves from the damage we're getting from these different things? So he came up with a program, and when the bomb was dropped, it was put into play, and not one person got sick. First thing was, no sugar. For anybody, no sugar. Well, that's pretty good and easy in wartime. There's not much sugar available, but that's what he did. All right, second thing, brown rice. Genmai rather than Hakamai. But what I want you to do is don't think that you're going to have to follow this particular diet. What's the principle? What's the principle in Genmai? What's the principle? Whole grain. The whole grain, the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. You got to get the whole grain. He gave miso soup. All right, there's some tofu in there, which is very protective, but there's also some ferments in there. Now, I don't think we should eat fermented food all the time, but in cases like this, it helped reestablish the basic flora in our intestinal tract. He gave sea vegetables, very high in minerals, especially things like iodine, which we're going to talk about in a few moments. He gave Hokkaido pumpkin. What's the principle there? Whole vegetables, whole fruits, eating whole foods, and then he gave them sea salt. What does sea salt have that the regular salt does not have? All the minerals. So this was the basic diet. He had his patients and his staff on, and nobody got sick. What's really sad to me is nobody knows his name. Don't forget, Dr. Akazuki. He died, I think, in 2005. But I think we should take our hat off to him. But in 2011, in what year was it? 2012. Fukushima Daiichi melted down on March the 11th. Now, in June of 1986, that's when Fukushima Daiichi happened. Chernobyl happened. You see, this is a picture right now of the area over the reactor at Chernobyl. This is the third time they made a sarcophagus over it, metal and concrete, to try to contain the radiation, because the reactor is still hot. Is the reactor at Fukushima Daiichi still hot? Is it? You don't know. It is. How long is it going to be hot? Well, a conservative estimate is 100 years. Other estimates are 10,000 years. So there is a major problem that this thing is continuing to put out low levels of radiation. But now we're going to start getting some good news here. A thing called selective uptake. What does that mean? Your body wants the very best nutrients it can get. So looking at these two apples, which one would you prefer to eat? Don't worry about the child. Just keep with the program. Which one would you prefer to eat? The one that organic, nice, beautiful red one. Sorry, folks, I already ate that one. Now, you're really hungry. Will you eat that one? If you're hungry enough, you'll eat it. The body is exactly the same way. It wants the very finest nutrients that it can get. It wants sulfur. If you're getting good sources of sulfur in your diet, you're good to go. But if your sulfur levels get low, there is a radioactive isotope called sulfur 35. That's the bad apple. It's got a half-life of 87 days. What does half-life mean? You get some of that in your body in 87 days, half of it is still there. But the scary part is what happened to the other half. It's breaking off in what we call alpha and beta particles. Electrons and protons and neutrons are shooting off, and they're going through your DNA and causing more mutations. So the question we should be asking, how do I keep my sulfur up? Sulfur-containing foods. Your cruciferous foods. Have we talked about those before? Yes. Onions and garlic. Right now, there's a place near where I run back up in Tancho. They've got a whole field of okra, and their okra is very high in sulfur. So these are the foods that we should be eating. All right, potassium. Our body needs potassium. If you sweat a lot, you need even more potassium. Now, I've got on that slide, I've got a picture of a liver, a kidney, and male-female thing. Basically means your liver, your kidneys, and your sex organs really need a lot of potassium. So whenever you see those pictures, you know the main organs that are going to be affected. But if you're not getting enough potassium in your diet, well, you're going to get cesium-137. Cesium-137 is a radioactive isotope, and its half-life is 30 years. That means if you are not getting enough potassium, you're going to get cesium-137, and it's going to build up in your body, and basically every 30 years you still have half of it left. And if you're continuing to replace what you're losing because you're not taking care of your potassium needs, big problem. So where do we get potassium? Whole food, plant-based diet. Now there's just, and don't try to write down all those fruits and all those numbers. Everyone knows how to get on the internet nowadays. Type in vegan sources of potassium and say, I'm going to eat these, I'm going to make sure I get some of these foods every single day. Now, if you really start to get down, if you think, I know I'm really down on my potassium, maybe you have a blood test, peel a potato, boil the skins, peel an onion, boil the skins, add some parsley, boil that for about 30 minutes, drink the juice, that is potassium broth. You will bring your potassium up. Very important. Okay, how about iodine? What picture do I have there? What's that showing you a picture of? That's the thyroid. That's where your thyroid hormone is. What is your thyroid hormone? It's iodine. That's what it is, it's iodine. And, but if you're not getting enough iodine in your diet, which is the good apple, you're going to get the bad apple, which is iodine 131. One of the most carcinogenic of all of them. And when Fukushima Daiichi happened, the amount of iodine 131 in the atmosphere around there was almost 5,000 times above legal, safe limits. And if you went down to the aquifer, it was 10,000 times above safe limits. Whoa, that's pretty scary, isn't it? Half-life's only 8 days, but if you're constantly being exposed to it, you're always going to have high levels of iodine 131. So where do we get iodine? Well, your sea vegetables. Of course, it's questionable where you got your sea vegetables since the water's polluted, but you can be able to find some. But if you can't find it from sea vegetables, which you can, there's plenty of other foods that have iodine in them. Or you might just get some iodine supplements. There was a doctor in Tokyo who for years and years and years told the government, stockpile iodine. We're going to need it someday, because he foresaw what happened at Fukushima, and they never did it. And as soon as it happened, iodine disappeared, because everyone who knew about that started buying the iodine. I have some Udall's iodine. What you do is you just put some and you just rub it on your skin. If it disappears, it means you were low in iodine. And I do that periodically, not while I'm here, but every once in a while I do that, because we've got to make sure that we're not going to allow ourselves to be affected by iodine 131. Iron, we mentioned iron last night. Of course, the big picture there is, the background is blood, red blood cells. Hemoglobin is going to have, heme is iron. And we won't go into all those numbers there. The lungs need it, the sex organs need it, the liver needs it. But if you're not getting enough iron, and that's a major problem, we're going to have a thing called plutonium-238 and plutonium-239. Half-life, 88 years. I didn't change that to years, but that's 88 years. What's it called when you don't have enough iron in your body? Anemia. Do you know anyone anemic? Can you do an anemia test right now? We did a B12 test last night. Let's do an anemia test. Hold your hand, grab your fingers, look at your palm. You've got three major lines in most palms. What I want you to do is look at your palm and then bend your fingers back very quickly. How long does it take the lines to get red or turn darker? It should be instantaneous. It should immediately fill with blood. If not, a chance that you might have anemia. But if you're worried about that, then you just go to somebody and pull down your eye or look in the mirror at your conjunctiva and see what color it is. It should be pink. If it's white, you are anemic. And if you are anemic, then plutonium-238 and plutonium-239 is on your menu. You're going to be eating that bad apple. So where do we find the iron sources? Green leafy vegetables, red things, especially tomatoes, especially thickened tomatoes. The thicker, the better. Soybeans, pumpkin seeds. Blackstrap molasses, very high in iron. If you think you're low in iron, get some blackstrap molasses, a couple of spoonfuls stirred in warm water, and drink it down before you go to bed. You're going to be building up your iron. Very nice way of doing it. Another thing you can do is dried fruits, raisins, prunes, dates. These are going to be high in iron. We need to find out these good nutrients. Okay, so, and we're just giving a short picture of this thing. We could go through all the different things, but that pretty much takes care of our concerns about radioactive isotopes. How about viruses? Anything we can do about viruses? What does virus have to do with cancer? In 1966, two researchers named Huggins and Ruse received the Nobel Prize because they found that many cancers are caused by virus infections. Wow. So what can we do about that? We've already talked about it. What can we do? We get the immune system strong. If we have a strong immune system, and last night we talked about the avenues by which viruses and other pathogens get into the body. What were the 4 avenues we talked about last night? The eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the skin. So keep your fingers out of your eyes, out of your nose, out of your mouth, and if you cut your skin, protect it. And that will take care. It's pretty hard to get a virus if they can't get in. Oh yeah, there they are, pictures right there. And basically keep your whole surroundings clean. Keep your clothes clean. And when you go to the store, and when I see people, they go to the store, this is in America, and they're looking at the grapes, and they'll pluck a grape and they'll taste it to see how it tastes like. They have no idea what was crawling across that thing, who sneezed it, who touched it before they got there, and they're just asking for these things in their body. So basically, we don't have to worry about viruses if we're taking care of ourselves. I'm going to go for a few more slides here because there's some very important thing, and I won't go for the whole cancer program, but people, when you get cancer, remember, it begins with one cell, it divides, it divides, it divides, it divides, until finally you got a small tumor. Now, we talked the very first night about the basic foundation of health and the 3 golden pillars. What was the first golden pillar? It was the life is in the blood. That tumor eventually is going to need its own dedicated blood source. At first it's going to get blood from the surrounding tissues, but now we're starting to grow. It needs more blood to enable it to grow. So what it does is it will produce what we call angiogenic growth factors, things that make the cells grow faster or make the tumor grow faster. So it's going to, or basically it's going to influence a blood vessel nearby to start building a capillary bed that's going to go to that tumor until finally you have a tumor that's got its own dedicated blood supply. They got blood supply going in, and they got blood supply and little pieces of that tumor going off to other parts of the body. Many people think that causes metastases. So now we got to think, how can we stop that from happening? You can get a medication that's called a COX-2 inhibitor. Don't worry about that, but we can get them naturally by taking red grapes. Red grapes have a COX-2 inhibitor factor. Will keep those growth factors from being released that will cause that blood vessel to grow into your tumor. Curcuma, turmeric, will do the same thing. I would say we should take a maintenance dose of some of these things every day. You can also use soy products. Make sure they're not genetically modified, most of which are. But if you do these things, you're going to be able to stop it in its tracks. And that's what we want to do. The genistein, that's a phytochemical in soy. It suppresses tumor production by stopping these growth factors in there. Okay, I really feel like I need to stop, give you a little bit of a break, and we're going to shift to diabetes. I'll just briefly tell you other things I was going to talk about. Chlorinated water, acid foods, dairy products, which we already talked about before. All of these things will accelerate growth of cancer. High sodium diets will accelerate cancer growth. So let's take a little break. I'm just going to quickly switch over to diabetes, and then we'll get into there. We'll talk about the two main types. Yes. Just a minute. Let me just get acid alkali is measured by what we call pH, which is really, turn it backwards, hydrogen potential, okay? So what is the perfect pH for the human body? I'm going to give you a way to never forget. I guess everyone's talking about other things, but those of you who are listening, the perfect pH, I can't hear myself talk. How many days are in a week? 7. How many days are in a year? 365. That's the perfect pH. 7.365. Isn't that interesting? If you go down to 7.2 or 7.1, you're acid. Now, how do you get these acid states? When we're putting acidic things into the body. What is the pH of meat? 5.2 to 5.7. What's the pH of milk? 6. They're acid. And so when we put these acidic things into the body, first thing, the body's got to alkalize them. How's it going to alkalize an acid? How do you alkalize an acid? You add an alkali. What's the main alkali in your body? Calcium. So basically, the body takes some calcium out of your bones to bring your pH back up where it needs to be. Once it's done the job, it excretes it through the urine. So now you're dumping a lot of calcium in your urine, and you've also promoted osteoporosis.
Another question.
Okay?
Since we're talking about alkaline and how it stabilizes your body, what's your take on drinking alkaline water?
It's very popular, and I'm not opposed to that. It's like eating organic food. I'm not opposed to that either. I just can't afford it in most places you're going to go. So if there's alkalized water available, I'll drink it. If not, I'll just drink the best water I can get. And like, you know, I didn't bring my water bottle with me again tonight, but I've got charcoal in my water bottle at all times. That doesn't so much balance the pH probably, but it takes microorganisms out. But I try to drink the best water I can find. But remember, you know, there are many factors in disease. We don't want to leave even one door open. But if one door is open, not because of ourselves, if we're doing everything else right, we can probably get past it. It's just the way it works. It's mercy that shows us. All right, now, we better get this program off of cancer here and get on to diabetes. We're ready to start. We're going to diabetes? Where's the pastor? Well, if you don't know, that is diabetes. And we're just going to go ahead and start. You can look at this one on the right, and Sheila will translate it for you. How do we diagnose? I'm going to give you various ways of diagnosing diabetes. The way that let's go back to the old days. The old days, the way they diagnosed diabetes is the doctor would get a urine sample from their patient, stick his finger in it, and he'd taste it. If it was sweet, it was a diagnosis of diabetes, because basically the person was dumping sugar. You shouldn't have sugar in your urine. And that's how they test it. Nowadays, thankfully, we've got things like urine dipsticks. We can take a glucometer and test it that way and find out what our glucose is. Now, when you measure your glucose, what condition should you be in to properly measure your glucose? Fasting, a good 12 hours. And when you do that, you're going to get the good safe range between 70 and 85. But there's another test which is called hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin A1C doesn't look back 12 hours. It looks back 3 months. Because you see, sugar is sticky, and it sticks to your platelets, and when they're measuring the hemoglobin A1C in your blood, they're going to find out if you've been a good boy or girl in the past. If it's between 4 and 5.6%, you're doing good. I'd say lower than that would be better, but that's pretty good. If you're 5.7 to 6.4, there's a name for that. You know what the name is? Pre-diabetic. It's interesting. I've been a vegan for many, many years. My sisters think I am crazy, and they eat everything that crawls, swims, flies, and otherwise. And they don't want to hear anything about health from me. But my little sister had a physical, she had a blood test, and the doctor wrote on the blood test, pre-diabetic. And she came straight to me. What can I do? See, when you finally get the problem, that's when you're going to start listening. If you are 6.5 or more, you are a diabetic. You've had too much sugar in your blood for far too long. Now, there are two main types of diabetes we've mentioned already. The first one is IDDM, which stands for insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. Type 1, we also call it juvenile diabetes, because normally it's developed in young children. So we got to, like every other disease, what causes type 1 diabetes? If you ask the average person on the block, they're going to say, well, it is a genetic problem. Is there a genetic factor in type 1 diabetes? Yes, there is. But they did an interesting study. They took a group of rats and they bred them and bred them and bred them until they were genetically predisposed to diabetes. And you can do that. Every animal gets diabetes. And then they did something. They had a bunch of baby rats born. They had them in two groups. The one group, they were fed their mother's milk, the mother rat's milk. And they all had the same genetics. How many of those rats got diabetes? Not one of them. The other group of rats, they were artificially fed cow's milk. How many of them got diabetes? Every single one of them. Cow's milk. Pretty dangerous. One of the causes of type 1 diabetes is early exposure to cow's milk. That's why we see it a lot in young children, because they're going to start drinking formula very early, and you have to search very hard to find a baby formula that does not have casein or lactose in it. It's going to have it, especially the casein. All right, so how does that work? In our body, we're going to see some, right, those are some amino acids. Amino acids are building blocks of proteins. We have cells in our pancreas that produce insulin, okay? They're called the islets of Langerhans. That's neither here nor there. But they're made up of a 17 amino acid chain of proteins made up of 17 amino acids. But in nature, there is another protein that looks exactly like the protein that produces the insulin. And which one is that? That's going to be casein, cow's milk, the protein in cow's milk, casein. Now, we mentioned last night that amongst Europeans, 50% are going to be allergic to this. Amongst Asians, remember the percentage? 90 to 95%. Amongst those of African origin, 95 to 100% will be sensitive to the casein. Which means if the casein is in that sensitive person's body, the body's going to mount up a defense, and it's called the immune defense. And so it's going to make antibodies. So the antibodies have been trained to go after casein. What does casein look like? 17 amino acids, okay? So it goes there and it attacks the casein, and boom, it's got it. But now it's still circulating through the body, and it goes down into the pancreas. And it finds the same looking thing, 17 amino acids, and what are you going to have? You've got autoimmune disease. And the autoimmune disease is type 1 diabetes. You just killed the cells that made the insulin. It's an autoimmune disease. Type 2 diabetes is a totally different disease. Now, we usually call that thing adult onset diabetes, right? Come on, guy, you got to change the program. We're in diabetes, okay? Talking about chlorine up there. But now we've found that type 2 diabetes has become a childhood disease. Our diets, our lifestyles have gotten so bad that we're getting diseases younger and younger. Okay, so now, besides tasting the person's urine, another way to diagnose a person is in diabetes, this is going to look 5 steps right here. The first one is they're going to be overweight. If a person's overweight, it's opening the door to diabetes. Not a major problem here in Japan, but like I told you the other night, Okinawan children are the fattest children in Japan. Children lay that foundation of fat. They're going to battle it the rest of their life. If a person becomes overweight, they're going to also develop what we call carbohydrate intolerance. That means they can no longer properly digest, no longer properly break down carbohydrates. And that's going to manifest itself by being tired all the time, not being able to think clearly, having digestive problems, and having a craving for sweets. This is what's going to happen in this person with carbohydrate intolerance. All right, that leads to the next step. Since you're not digesting it well, you got a lot of sugar in the body, and so you're going to get a thing called insulin resistance. There's so much sugar, the body says, stop this foolishness. And so, remember we talked about how many receptor sites there were in an average cell in the body? How many were there? 20,000. But if you are getting too much sugar built up in your system, it's going to say, we got to stop this, and so it reduces the number to maybe 5,000. Now you're not getting enough energy to run the machine, and you're feeling tired all the time. So what's happening? You got the cell, it wants glucose, here's glucose coming, but there's no way to get it in there because the insulin's not working. It's knocking at the door, but it's not getting in. Now the cell is going to send a signal to the brain. What's the signal it's going to send to the brain? I'm hungry. Because it's not getting any food. And so now a person is hungry all the time. We call it polyphagia. We're looking at good diagnostics for type 2 diabetes. They're always hungry. So now they're eating a lot of food, but it's not getting into the cell. So what's happening? The sugar is going to be building up in the bloodstream. The body does not want all that sugar. Come on, poke the button. All the sugar building up in the bloodstream. So now it's got to get rid of it. How does the body get rid of the sugar in the bloodstream? How did the old doctors test for diabetes? They tasted the urine. And so now the person is urinating all the time. We call it polyuria. Because the body says, we've got to get rid of all of this sugar. And so it's going to be dumping it out of the body. But now, since the blood is 92% water, what next signal is your brain going to get? Because now you're peeing all the time. Excessive thirst, polydipsia. Those three things, polyphagia, polyuria, and polydipsia, are good signs that a person has type 2 diabetes. Okay? Insulin resistance, the next step from insulin resistance is going to be diabetes. But it doesn't stop there. Next step might be heart disease, might be cancer. It could be many, many other problems. Because basically diabetes is a gateway to almost every other disease. If you have diabetes, it's really bad news. We call diabetes type 2 a metabolic syndrome problem. We just call it, another name for it is metabolic syndrome. And it's not a very nice thing. So now there's going to be 6 signs of the metabolic syndrome. If you have just one of these, you're too far down the road already. You got to back up. First one is going to be abdominal obesity. All right, for men, they can have about 102 centimeters around the navel. Women, 88 centimeters around the navel. You get above that, you've got the first step towards the metabolic syndrome. But there's another way to look at this thing too. It is going to be the body shape. This is the second one. Which body shape is the healthiest body shape? The apple or the pear? It's going to be the pear. It's carrying the weight low rather than high, okay? But now, my thoughts are, neither one of them are extremely healthy. So we got to add another fruit to the salad here. That's the shape you should have. Try to be a banana. But you do not want to have, we call it trunkle, the trunk obese. My sisters carry the weight high. They got skinny legs, and they're not fat, but they've just got a lot of the weight up above, and it's not a healthy way to live. All right, so that's the second one. You got the abdominal obesity, measuring there, the body shape. Next one's going to be having high blood pressure, or taking blood pressure medication, or having a diastolic above 85. That's your low number. above 85. You don't want this. Remember, if you have just one of these things, you've got one step towards type 2 diabetes. The next one's going to be abnormal blood fats. Basically, you're going to have low HDL, you're going to have high triglycerides. Triglycerides basically come from eating a highly refined diet. Get to your simple foods, okay? So that was the next two. The next one's going to be your fasting blood glucose. This is the last one. It's got to be under 100. It's got to be. It's better to be under that. But if you 100 or above, it's one step towards type 2 diabetes. Now people, we talked about the study with the rats. People say, well, I'm not a rat. Well, let's look at some population studies with Native Americans. There's one particular native tribe in America called the Pima Indians. 700 years ago, the tribe, which were all interrelated, they divided. Some of them stayed in what is now Arizona. The other went down into what is now Mexico. The ones who live in Arizona, and I work with the Indians there, they have a government check every month. They drink a lot of alcohol. They get free commodities. When the grocery stores, things are out of date, they give them to the Indians. And over 50% of them have diabetes, over 50%. But now they're cousins with the same DNA who went down to Mexico, who are farmers, who eat meat once every 2 or 3 months when they can find it. How much diabetes do they have? Same genetics? Less than 10% of them are diabetic. Amazing. So there may be a genetic component, but it's lifestyle that's going to pull the trigger. But we need glucose in our body. That's the fuel for our bodies. And it basically feeds the whole body. And we got to have, just sort of review, we've got to have insulin let it into the cell. But if we have that insulin not working, we're going to build up sugar, and it's going to hurt your entire body. So we're going to look now at some of the ramifications, some of the complications of having a chronically high blood sugar. One is atherosclerosis. Now, if you have atherosclerosis, what's that going to cause? Well, the next thing is going to cause a great increase in heart disease. 200 to 400% greater risk of heart disease if you have type 2 diabetes. Same amount, I forgot to translate that word too, same amount for strokes, up 200 to 400% if you have diabetes. Cancer rates greatly increased for diabetics. One of the leading causes of blindness is diabetes. If you've ever been to a doctor for a physical, they turn out the lights, they tell you to look at some place in a wall, and they shine this light in your eye, and they're turning this little dial. They're looking at the back of your eye. They can see the blood vessels. They can tell a lot from looking at those blood vessels. But if those blood vessels get destroyed by diabetes, which is what happens, you're going to be a blind person. It increases your risk of kidney failure 1,800%. You do not want type 2 diabetes. If you have it, sores do not heal. Now, I showed you this picture the other night. Did this sore heal? What was the treatment? Cabbage and onion poultices. She got well. She's one of the rare ones. But usually in a situation where a person has a diabetic ulcer like that, the next step is going to be amputation. One of the leading causes of amputations is type 2 diabetes. For men, it causes impotence. Greatly increases a woman's risk of breast cancer and uterine cancers. Okay, some of the causes of diabetes. Overweight. Again, it's not a problem here, but you're going to know somebody with diabetes that's overweight. You got to tell them to quit it. You got to lose weight. How do you do that? Get off of animal products. Simple as that. Eating a whole food, plant-based diet is your diet for diabetics. Also, eating nothing after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which basically means moving towards a 2-meal plan. Now, if you've ever known someone with diabetes, the old way, and some people still prescribe this, is eating 5 small meals a day. How many have ever heard of that? 5 small meals a day. Call it grazing. That means your digestive system never gets to rest and you wear it out. So basically, 2 meals a day, a type 2 diabetic does fine on that. Even a type 1 can, a little bit more dicey there. You want to be careful. But 2 meals, type 2, no problem. Nothing between meals. Now, if I were to ask you the question, what's the main factor in the development of diabetes, what one word would you say? Can you think of a word? Most people are going to say sugar, right? Sugar causes sugar diabetes. We used to call it sugar diabetes. In Japanese, that's what it's called, sugar flowing through. But that's not the main cause. The main cause, if anyone asks you in the future, what's the main cause of diabetes, it's going to be high-fat diets. High-fat diets. I was reading a study today. I've had this slide for a long time, but I finally went into the internet. And I was looking up this Dr. Anderson from University of Kentucky, and I found him quoted in an article by a guy named Hans Steele. Have you ever heard of Hans Steele? He's got these chip programs for heart recovery. And he says, and he quoted this study, and he said that we had exactly the same results as this doctor did. And here's what it was. For 2 weeks, they put, and what they did is they put these patients, these medical students, on a high-fat diet, which they loved because they got to eat all the high-fat food they wanted. They could eat at McDonald's anytime they wanted. Everything is paid for. Now, this thing says they did it for 2 weeks. In the one study, in 1 week, they had to stop the study. You know why? 70% of them were now diabetic. In 1 week. But basically in this study, 2 weeks, at the end of 2 weeks, everyone was pre-diabetic. Yeah, everyone was pre-diabetic on a high-fat diet, 2 weeks. They also, in the same part of the study, they gave each patient about a pound of sugar to eat a day and about 5% fat in their diet. At the end of 11 weeks, not one pre-diabetic. Fat. We don't need fat in the diet, okay? And this is the enemy right here. Oh, what about olive oil? Now, I'm not saying you can't have a little bit of olive oil. We're talking about people who eat a lot of fat, especially fried foods. But if it is a fat that's been taken out of the plant itself, refined, it's bad for you. If you want fat, there's the fat you need to eat right there. That's where it was born. The avocado, the nuts, the seeds, the olives, corn. I mean, corn oil comes from corn. How many ears of corn does it take to make a tablespoon of corn oil? Does anyone know? 12 to 14 ears. You can't eat that much corn. And once you take it, you've taken away all the minerals, all the vitamins, all the fiber, all the things that kept it in a good state. You don't want it. Or another cause of type 2 diabetes is not enough sunlight. I have known two, now let's go to type 1s also. Type 1 diabetics, I've known 2 of them at UT Pines. One of them was a short lady, totally blind, skinny as a rail. She had sores always on her body. She died at 34. The other guy, as tall as me, didn't even wear glasses, but he knew how to regulate his body by sunshine, exercise, and diet. And he kept himself under control, taking a maintenance dose of insulin. Sunlight has an insulin-like effect on glucose in the body. Sunlight can help take glucose into your cells without the aid of insulin. Pretty nice. Another thing, 60% of diabetics have low levels of vitamin D. 60%. We get vitamin D from sunshine. A sedentary lifestyle is one of the primary contributors to obesity and insulin resistance. So we got to get out there, we got to move our body. Regular exercise can help your body respond to insulin. Again, this guy at Uchee Pines, he knew exercise, sunshine, and diet could regulate his insulin and his glucose, and he took very little insulin. And he was a type 1. He still is a type 1. He's still out there perking away. And this has been, he's probably in his close to 60 by now. Excess exercise can lower blood glucose and possibly reduce the amount of medication you need to treat diabetes. When we have a diabetic come to Uchee Pines, let me just tell you, I'll just write out here, the main things that we do for a diabetic, we put them on a whole food plant-based diet. We get them out in the sunshine exercising. We get them drinking water. And every single one gets off of medication if they're type 2. Every single one. My idea, you can cure type 2 diabetes. Well, I also believe you can cure type 1, but that's a much longer discussion. Exercise will reduce obesity and will increase glycogen storage. What is glycogen? It's what glucose does when it has no place to go and you've got exercise. It turns it into stored energy. Stores it in the liver, stores it in your muscles. So then when you need some extra energy, glycogen breaks down into glucose and you can keep on going. Exercise improves circulation. When a person has diabetes, they've got bad circulation. That's why they start getting diabetic neuropathy. They can't feel very well. They get cold all the time, and they start losing their appendages because of poor circulation. Remember, the second golden pillar is perfect health requires perfect circulation. Water drinking. If you are not properly drinking your water, insulin doesn't work. You've got to stay well hydrated in order to keep yourself from getting problems. What's the first sign of dehydration? Thirst. If you feel thirsty, you're dehydrated. You need to somehow go through the life that you're always drinking water just because it's just like breathing. You got to take a breath, you take a drink of water. Now, here's another problem we have. On the inside of your blood vessels, there's a cells called endothelial cells. Endothelial cells do not need insulin to receive glucose. Do you see the problem? If our glucose is very high all the time, then those cells are taking in far more sugar than they should, and they start to become sticky. And now that fat, because you're eating too much fat too, starts sticking, and now you've got the atherosclerosis. And so we need to make sure that we keep our blood glucose down into the safe range. High fiber diet is what we need. We put our, well, a whole food plant-based diet is a high fiber diet. And that's what you need for a diabetic. Animal products, no fiber. A type 2 diabetic should not have any animal products. They got to get the fiber. It slows down. Yeah, when you eat a meal, and I usually show a little picture here. I've made up a little animation. If you eat a candy bar, glucose shoots up like this. Insulin, pancreas squeezes out insulin, shoots it up, and brings it right back down again. And now you're in basically a sugar low. So you got to have something else to bring you back up again. If you have a high fiber diet, glucose goes up slowly, insulin goes up slowly, and it brings it down slowly. So you got far more time that glucose is giving you energy, usually until your next meal. Beans. If you know somebody with type 2 diabetes, even type 1, beans every meal. Doesn't have to be a big bowl of beans, just a small amount of beans, basically because of their high fiber. A study that was done, 18 type 1, 19 type 2 diabetics. They put them on what's prescribed as the diabetic diet. There's a diet that they have for that. But they added one thing too in the study. 6 weeks on a diabetic diet that included legumes. Every day, we like them every meal. At the end of the 6 weeks, and during that 6 weeks, doing all the measurements, their average glucose levels, their average cholesterol levels, the average amount of sugar in their urine was all significantly lower than those people on the standard diabetic diet. That means they were in much better shape. Just eating beans. Doesn't matter what bean, just eat any bean you want. There are some medications you can take. You can take things like, what herb is this? That's cinnamon. It lowers blood sugar levels. It makes cells more sensitive to insulin. It's a medication. When my sister came to me, what can I do? Because she was told she was pre-diabetic, I happen to have a small bottle of cinnamon tablets. I gave them to her. It took care of her problem like that. She still takes the things. Told her she's still eating fat. All right, ginger. It's another one. It also regulates blood sugar. It also makes your cells more insulin sensitive to the insulin. These are things that we can take every day. Very, very good. And they're also anti-inflammatories. So, do lifestyle factors really make a difference? We're going to look at 2 patients that we had at Uchee Pines. The first one, he was a male. No, I changed that into pounds. Where'd it go? He weighed 263 pounds, if you don't know what kilograms are, and he was a type 2 diabetic. He was taking 175 units of insulin a day. That's a lot of insulin for a type 2 diabetic. But his blood glucose levels were out of control. You could have used it for syrup on your pancakes, it was so high. He'd already had 2 heart attacks. Remember, diabetes affects the heart. He was taking medication for high blood pressure. He had high blood cholesterol, and his kidneys were in failure. Remember, diabetes increases your risk of kidney failure by 1,800%. 5 days into the program, his blood glucose levels were very well managed, between 80 and 120. He had lost 10 pounds. He was down to 130 units of insulin. How in the world can you lose 10 pounds in 5 days? Now, I don't suggest you do what we do at Uchee Pines, because we monitor them closely. When we have a type 2 diabetic at Uchee Pines, 5 days of pure fasting. Water fast. Yes, but you got to measure their blood pressure and their glucose constantly to make sure that they're stable. And we never had a problem with that, and boom, he was down. After he comes out of the fast, he's on what we call a green diet. Nothing but greens, salad greens. After 2 weeks, he had lost 16 pounds, taking 58 units of insulin a day. Wow. 175 down to 58. After 1 month, he was off of all insulin. He had lost 25 pounds. He was off of all blood pressure medications. But now it gets serious. Now he goes home. And this is where we have the problem. When you're at Uchee Pines, everyone's cooking for you, they're taking care of you, they're walking with you, they're watching you. But when you go home, you're going back to the same old kitchen, the same old easy chair, but he saw what had happened. He stayed with the program. 5 months later, whoops, it already was there, wasn't it? Off of all medications, normal kidney function, kidneys completely well, lost 60 pounds, normal blood pressure, normal cholesterol. Anyone can do this. All right, second patient, 22-year-old male with type 1 diabetes. He was taking 70 units of insulin a day, but his glucose was up and down. You could not control it. All right, listen closely. You do not fast a type 1 diabetic. He's got to stay with the program, got to stay with the meals. But putting him on the 3 meals, high green diet, in 2 weeks, He was down to 56 units of insulin. His glucose was now stable. After 1 month, 32 units of insulin, you're not going to get much lower than that, and his glucose remained stable. He was a very happy young man. Now that's basically it about diabetes, but there's one more thing I got to warn you about. I talked about it in our little workshop at noon today about putting a diabetic's feet in hot water. Never do it, especially if they're type 1 or type 2, well, type 1 and type 2 insulin-dependent diabetics. You do not do it. And here's the reason why, and this, we've talked about this a few times. That's glucose. It gets into the cell. The glucose breaks down into three things. It's going to break down into carbon dioxide, water, and adenosine triphosphate. No problem with the water, no problem with the energy, but the carbon dioxide is a problem. Now, if somebody has, and I talked about doing this experiment, if somebody has type 2 diabetes and they're insulin dependent, it means their vascular system, their circulatory system already is damaged. And so if you put your feet in hot water, you increase metabolism. This is a law of chemistry, Van Hoff's law. So basically now you're burning more energy faster, but your body cannot carry away the carbon dioxide. Do you see the problem developing here? We can do that. I do this experiment with my students sometimes. I put a blood pressure cuff on, pump it up, stop oxygen blood flow, have them do an exercise. Here's what happens. At first, their hand feels numb. They start to lose energy. Then they feel pins and needles. And then they feel pain. Big pain. How do you stop the pain? Let the air out. It's gone. Because it wasn't pain, it was a signal that we're being damaged down here. Trouble is with a diabetic type 2, they can't feel it. They can't feel that they're being damaged. And so that might happen. That's gangrene. I knew of a patient whose counselor gave that patient a Russian steam bath, and the hot water was dripping on his feet. He couldn't feel it. He was an insulin-dependent diabetic. He lost both feet. They had to be amputated. Because that's the natural result. It's going to be amputation if you get that gangrene down there. So that's just a warning. So we've been talking for 4 nights, a lot of things we've talked about. We come to forks and roads every day. Decision time. There's a song, a country western song some years ago. It says, right or left at Oak Street, it's a choice I make every day. We've got choices every day. What language does a computer use? Binary, 0 and 1, yes or no, open and closed. Our whole life is that way. We've got choices we make. You all made a choice tonight to come here. I think that was a good choice, okay? Some of you came here every single night. That's a good choice. But after you leave here with all the information, you took notes, or you got it all in your short term, and you're going to put it in long-term memory because you're going to be in bed in a half hour, and it's going to be cooking away there. It's decide what you're going to do tomorrow. Are you going to exercise? You're going to get your sunshine and your fresh air? Are you going to move towards a whole food, plant-based diet? Are you going to start drinking your 2 to 4 liters of water a day? Are you going to be in bed by 9 o'clock every night? I know it's hard when we're having meetings, but when you get back to normal, I'm talking to Marco here. Marco, we got to get to bed on time. Yeah, I'm tearing these people up. I live in their house. They got to take care of me. They got to entertain me, but we got to get on the schedule. It's a life and death matter for most of us. There's a Bible verse I like very much. It's found in Ecclesiastes. I think it's 10 verse 8. It says, he that breaks a hedge, a serpent shall bite him. We've got a hedge. We've got a wall around us. I call them the 15 laws of health. These things are to protect our health. If we don't do one of them, we've broken the hedge, and the serpent can come in and bite us. Who's the serpent? Satan's the serpent. Where do all diseases come from? the mind of Satan. He's the one that cooks these things up. And if we will follow the plan we've talked about, keeping the laws of health, we're not supposed to get sick. We only get sick when we start to violate the laws of health. And sometimes we just have to do it. I remember one time I was giving some lectures. An old man came in. I thought, this guy must have smoked for 90 years. It turns out he went to Madison College under Sutherland, and he took as his mission field the streets of Los Angeles. He spent his whole life ministering on the streets of Los Angeles, breathing Los Angeles air. He'll get a brand new set of lungs real quick. Any questions about anything we talked about tonight or this week? If you have a long question, you need something big explained, I'll give you a card. You can write me and I can send you counseling sheets. I can write up stuff. It's a whole lot easier than trying to answer the long question in a question and answer, but something that wasn't clear to you that we mentioned tonight. Anyone have anything like that? Well, huh? Okay, fine. Now, I'm going to be back here in 2 weeks with my daughter. I'm so happy about that. My daughter's joining me. And my granddaughter. I don't see him too much. We're going to be doing a series of meetings. Friday, Sabbath, Sunday, and Wednesday night. Okay? Each evening. So we got Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday night open. We will, maybe not every night, we'll announce it, we'll have some more health talks. We'll have counseling sessions. I'm free to counsel with you if you have questions, you have concerns. I'm hoping to spend a little bit of time with my daughter and granddaughter, show them a little bit about the island where I lived 45 years ago. But other than that, we come here to work. And we'll be glad to help with your problems, give you whatever aid that we can. You'll love my daughter. She's a great child. Okay, well, if there's no other question, if there's no questions at all, we're going to do something that I've never done before. We're going to stop 5 minutes early. Well, I guess I could have finished that cancer program, couldn't have I? Yes, yes, yes. About what? Heat stroke. Yeah, that's a good question. And basically, we don't always know exactly what causes the body to quit its function of keeping the body cool. We talked about that at noon today, about the way the body keeps it cool is by the sweating process. For some reason, we stop sweating. Now, you may drink a lot of water, but just drinking a lot of water at one time, if you've been not drinking water time before that, that water's gone pretty fast. And now you're going to get back into the point where your body says, we don't have enough water. See, the body's very conservative. Your water level gets low. It's going to use water for what it considers the most vital functions. And sweating is not going to be one of those sometimes. And if you stop sweating, temperature's going to go up very quickly. Why that happens, we don't know. Why does it in some people? Usually it is a person in a very hot environment, and they've not been drinking enough water, and they just get overcome with the heat. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think medical science knows why we get heat strokes. They're going to say, because you got overheated. Okay? Well, you're right. When alcohol has a much lower evaporation temperature than water does. So you're going to pretty much burn it off. And let's say you probably all bought a tincture of something, an herb that's been extracted with alcohol. You should not put that in your body, but you can replace the alcohol with glycerin. All right, here's how you do it. Let's say you've got a bottle of the alcohol. You add equal amount of glycerin to it and put it in a double boiler, heat the water, and it's going to evaporate the alcohol, and then you'll just have the glycerin left. But you'll still have the flavor of the alcohol. Probably not a major problem. Yeah. Yes, I can still eat it.
In Okinawa, they make black sugar. It's not white sugar with molasses added in. It's just not refined, very refined at all, sugar. So is that more healthy?
Okay. It's a good question. You know, in America, we get a lot of our sugar from sugar cane. And in the South, where I lived for many years, they run it through a press and they squeeze it out. And now it's just basically sugar cane water. And you probably all drank it because you've got sugar cane in Okinawa. And it's not a very high sugar content. It's just basically water. But as you boil it, you start taking out the water, and it gets thicker and thicker. And every time it loses water, it's becoming more sugar and more sugar and more sugar. Just before granulated sugar, you got brown sugar. Brown sugar just means it's got a little bit more molasses in it. So basically, it's still sugar. It's sugar, like a rose is a rose, by any other name is still a rose. Sugar is sugar, by any other name is still sugar. Probably not the best.
Ruby has a question for you. Ruby wanted to ask, in traditional treatment for cancer, they use chemotherapy cocktails type, and after X amount of sessions, the doctor informs the patient that the cancer is gone or in remission. What actually happens after traditional
Okay.
application of
Okay. Okay, so if a person has gone through chemotherapy and the doctor makes a pronouncement, the cancer's gone, what it is, he just can't find it. But it's still there. It's still going to be there. Some of it's going to be somewhere in the body. But you're talking about the survivors. The success rate for chemotherapy is in the basement. Most oncologists would not take chemotherapy because it makes you miserable in the first place, destroys your immune system, makes your hair fall out, makes you sick to your stomach, and for the most times it just doesn't work. But here's the way they get these statistics saying it's successful is they say, okay, this person's got colon cancer. We will say that if we keep them alive for a year, that's a success. If they die on day number 366, it was still a success because they survived a year. So basically, to me, success is they live for 20 more years. Now, some people with chemotherapy do that. I've got a niece who had brain cancer, had chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, the whole thing, and she's doing fine now. I'm thankful for that. Here's my philosophy. Sometimes we've got to resort to allopathic medicine. But when we do, we are admitting we don't understand physiology well enough. Now, I've broken 16 bones. You're not going to fix a broken bone. Well, I did, really, naturally. When I broke this one and that one down there, you can't use natural means. When I broke my ribs, comfrey poultices healed them. I didn't need to go to a doctor for those. Same way with the clavicle, same way with the pelvis. But for the most part, see where I was going with that. When we have a disease and we don't know what to do, let's say you've got this infectious disease and you've tried everything then you'd go to the antibiotics. You go as a last resort. You don't do it as the first resort. You try the echinacea. You try the hyperthermia. You try the garlic. You try everything you can that's going to fight this thing. If it doesn't work and you're on death's door, then you go ahead and try the allopathic route because it might do it. But you're also going to accept the damage it does too. I'm not against allopathic medicine. It'd be nice if they could work more in cahoots. Both doctors who started UT Pines were allopathic physicians, an internist and a pathologist. They were brilliant, geniuses in their fields, but they spent their whole time never resorting to drugs. They treated with natural means and had fantastic results. Cancer, diabetes, you name the disease, they've had results, good results. Okay, now we finally got 5 minutes over, so I'm on par. I hope to see all of you in 2 weeks. Matter of fact, it'll be 2 weeks from tomorrow night, I guess we'll be starting the meetings, the 11th. We'll be at the Civic Center, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday. Just 12 meetings. There'll be 2 each Saturday, 2 meetings on each Saturday. The rest will just be the evening meetings. We'll have question and answer time. We'll do counseling and anything that you need. We come here to minister to you the whole body, not just the mind, not just the heart, but the whole body. Okay, so if we're done, let me have a word of prayer and we will go home and go to bed. Father in heaven, we're thankful for the opportunity we've had to be together here. I pray for your blessing upon each one of those who have joined us, that as they go home, they'll take something that they've learned for either their own healing or for someone else's healing. I pray, Father, for your blessing upon us. And as we're going to prepare for the meetings in 2 weeks, I pray, Father, that you would bless us. Bless my daughter and granddaughter as they travel here. May it be a high time for all of us. I pray in Christ's name and for his sake. Amen. Who was that biting my ankle? Who was that squeezing on my foot?